has released full judgment in which it declared the election of James Gyakye Quayson as unconstitutional. Stay with us because we have a conversation on what the implications are now that the Apex Court has given reasons for its decision. And also, school feeding caterers reject 1 cedi 20 peso proposed by government as they refuse to call off their strike over inadequate feeding grant and non-payment of arrears. Much later, an emergency meeting involving the Minister for Gender, Children and Social Protection and the caterers to try to resolve the impasse is underway. We have live updates for you if you stay with us here on Hot Edition on 3FM 92.7. A pleasure that you could be a part of this evening's bulletin. Like I mentioned, it's streaming live on Facebook. Our handles 3FM927. Same handles on Twitter. 3FM927. I am Eric Mawuena Egbeta, and we're getting straight into the details this evening because it's become a subject of controversy and a lot of debates, even featured in the vetting of Supreme Court nominee Justice Gertrude Tukono. Now, that ruling, the explanation and the reasoning by the Supreme Court has been made public, and the Supreme Court has released a full judgment in which it declared the election of James Gyakye Quayson as unconstitutional. According to the Apex Court, Mr. Quayson failed to show proof of him renouncing his Canadian citizenship as part of the time he contested the 2020 parliamentary elections. And what really are the reasons which the Supreme Court justices have ascribed to the ruling? My colleague Dennis Pabere-Wadam, he's joining me in studio with some more details. Dennis, you've been going through the over 30-page document which is the reasoning behind the decision by the Supreme Court on the 17th of May. What are the key highlights as you've discovered?
Well, so the Supreme Court basically has been talking to or speaking to two things which form the crux of the matter. One being on the allegations that the Member of Parliament then had not qualified as at the time he was contesting for that seat at Asen North. They had to determine whether at the time that he said he renounced its citizenship, which was the basis for the whole suit, was actually in time as provided for by law. So the question that the Supreme Court sought to answer or to clarify for the parties was the fact that at the time where James Gyakye Quayson renounced his citizenship and the time he contested for the election, whether it was something that was allowed in law. Mind you, he renounced his citizenship even though he had started the process. He had not got the renunciation certificate before he filed his nomination and went into the context. The case of the plaintiff was to the effect that this was a violation of Article 94(2), which clearly says that if you owe allegiance to another country or a country other than Ghana, you do not qualify to become a member of parliament. So the Supreme Court, going back into its own cases, referred to the case of ex partes senatoriales, in which that matter was decided, where the court decided that the time for one to renounce, or the time that one has to renounce the citizenship before contesting an election, if the person held a dual citizenship, was to be done before nominations by the EC are opened. And considering the fact that in the case of Gyakye Quayson, he did not have the renunciation certificate, which is a proof of renunciation, he did not qualify at that instance. So that question was answered. There was also the question of, there's also the question of owing allegiance to another country. Right. It's the contention of the defendants, in this case, James Gyakye Quayson, that owing allegiance, in his view, does not necessarily mean being a dual citizen, because he contends if that were the case, the Supreme Court, the laws of Ghana, Article 94(2) would have stated expressly that if you are a dual citizen, you do not qualify to be, to be a member of parliament. But then that argument was not taken into consideration, because the plaintiff's argument, which also the AG also supports, and then the Supreme Court sort of ruled on taking the same line, is that per our laws, to owe allegiance to another country, invariably it's equal to you being a dual citizen or you having loyalty to a different country, and that can be expressed in citizenship. So for the fact that he was a citizen of Canada, which he himself admitted to, was in clear violation of that. They cited the case of Asari versus the Attorney General. That was a case in which Koko Asari went to court to challenge that the fact that one was a dual citizen does not mean, one had a citizenship of a different country does not mean the person owed allegiance to that particular country. So they looked into that matter, looked back into our laws and related it to our citizenship laws, which clearly excluded some people who held dual citizenship from being appointed to specific offices. It included members of parliament, it included Chief Justice and such other people. So when they make that analysis, they come to the conclusion that indeed, if you hold a dual citizenship, then it means that you owe allegiance to a different, another country other than Ghana. So largely, these were the things that the Supreme Court was looking at, and they granted the release of the plaintiff, who actually said, whose claims were that the election of James Jachikwesin was unconstitutional because he did not satisfy Article 94(2), and that the decision of the EC to allow him to even go through the process was unconstitutional, it was unlawful. The decision of Parliament to swear him in as a member of Parliament was unconstitutional. And consequently, the Supreme Court agreed with the plaintiff and made those consequential orders. The ultimate being the fact that his name is struck out from the records of Parliament. So essentially, that's the sum of the case as we have it.
The case as we have it. We know that this has become a subject of a lot of controversy and debate over the last few weeks. Even the Chief Justice nominee, Ladyship Gertrude Tokonu, when she appeared before the vetting committee, the minority had cause to suggest that they wanted to see a copy of this ruling and the reason behind the Supreme Court, to which then they can make a claim as to whether or not they approve of her becoming the country's next Chief Justice. And so now that we have this, we can then begin to believe that we will begin to get finality on that particular matter. That's one. And then as well, whether or not James Jachikwesin will seek a review.
Well, so whether or not James Jachikwesin will seek a review largely depends on him. And we've heard from the NDC legal team that they are thinking of something of that sort. It hasn't been firmed up yet, but of course it's an option open to them. Because considering that this is a Supreme Court ruling, the only option they have by legal means is for them to seek a review at the same court. It came up in one of the, I think when James Jachikwesin was trying to strike out the rates of the plaintiff, his argument was that this was more like an election petition case which was dressed in a constitutional interpretation matter. Now, to understand this, we need to understand what the principles are. So if it's an election petition, considering that this is a parliamentary election petition, the right forum would have been the High Court. The final appellate court would have been the Court of Appeal. There would have been no instance that you have a parliamentary election petition before the Supreme Court. Yes. So he made that argument, seeking to urge the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court and ultimately strike out the rate. But the Supreme Court said no, there's a distinction between what is a parliamentary election petition and what is a constitutional matter which the Supreme Court has exclusive jurisdiction over. They make the case that this was not a case where they were seeking to determine the validity of the election, but this was a case where the plaintiff was seeking an interpretation of a portion of the Constitution and wanted it enforced. And within that remit, the Supreme Court had jurisdiction to sit over that case. So yes, a lot of interesting legal analysis. But of course, like you said, we hope this brings finality to it. And if the
like you mentioned, it's within the right of the defendant to seek a review.
And now on the part of the NDC MPs who want to see the judgment, yes, the judgment is out now. It's also on them to also look at it. If they are satisfied and they want to take a move which will be in favor of voting for the Chief Justice nominee who has been vetted, it's up to them. If they want to act otherwise, we're looking forward to see what's going to happen after this particular judgment has been released.
Right, then that's Dennis Pabere, my colleague here at 3FM TV3, providing a lot more details on the reasoning by the justices of the Supreme Court who sat on May 17th and decided that James Jachikwesin's name be expunged from the records of Parliament, and amongst many other things, essentially affirming an earlier High Court ruling, among amongst many other things, that the processes leading to the election of Mr. Kwesi were unconstitutional because at the time of the elections, or all throughout the process, it was deemed that he had dual citizenship, and as such it becomes an unconstitutional subject matter. We're seeking to get some more expert opinion on this, particularly a reaction from the National Democratic Congress. They are the opposition party, and they have particular interest in this particular subject matter. We've heard from Abraham Amaleba, who's the Director of Legal Affairs, over the last few weeks in relation to this, and as the party and the country in general prepares for that by-election at Assin North, and we'll be getting into details of that as well. But as they prepare for that as well, he's been quite vociferous in commentary in relation to the ruling. And like you heard Dennis mention, and I mentioned earlier as well, when the Chief Justice nominee made her way to Parliament and appeared before the Appointments Committee, that became a subject of contention as well. The argument put forth by the minority that they are waiting to see this judgment. It was originally scheduled to be made public on the 7th of June, but it wasn't fixed. It could be before the 7th of June, and today's the 5th. It's come out now, and the reasoning, my colleague Dennis Wadam has been taking us through it over the last few minutes. Abraham Amaleba, like I mentioned, is the Director of Legal Affairs of the NDC, who joined us on the telephone lines with some more details as to exactly what they make of the reasoning by the Supreme Court. They, amongst many things, said that they wanted to review, but unfortunately they didn't have the immediate judgment. Let us know what you think. It's well over 35-page document, to be specific, the reasoning of the Supreme Court in that landmark case on the 17th of May. We're live on Facebook, 3FM927, that's our handle, as well on Twitter, 3FM927. Leave a message for us, the hashtag 3FM927 as well, and we'll do the reading for you as we seek to get a lot of expert opinion as well. Alhaji Yunusaf Husseini is a private legal practitioner and a former member of the Tamale Central. He's joined us on the telephone lines as well, legal brain, to make meaning of the reasoning as provided by the Supreme Court. Honorable, many thanks for speaking to us this evening here on Hot Edition. I believe you've had a chance to go through the 35-page document. At first glance, your thoughts as to the reasoning as provided by the Supreme Court on some of the matters, particularly on a subject matter as to the processes which started. They make the argument quite strongly that there wasn't evidence to prove that James Gyakye Kwesi had renounced his Canadian citizenship. Hence, they came to the conclusion that he still owed allegiance to Canada.
Well, I have Mawuena. I have had a copy of the judgment, and I'm reading the judgment carefully. I'm actually at page 25 of the judgment. I'm left with 10 pages to complete the judgment.
Right.
The interesting issues that are outstanding, that are springing up, especially the issue of Section 21 of the Representation of the People's Act, which seem to suggest that the eligibility criteria for a member of parliament must be at the point of election, that when he is elected, in terms of Article 292A, 94(2)A. So I'm yet to see how the court has dealt with that provision. I've seen counsel. Initially, I thought that the counsel for the plaintiff, for the defendant, that is the first defendant, did not raise the matter in court. But it appears that the matter was raised in court. It agitated the minds of the people. Arguments were advanced in favor or against that position, and so I'm reading it carefully. But what I can say for now is, from the pages that I've read, appears to be that the judgment of the Supreme Court appears to be heavily influenced by the decision in Zanato case, the Republic against the High Court ex parte Zanato Rollins, in which the counsel had argued that even though Zanato was not a registered voter for the purposes of contesting the parliamentary elections in the Klole Kote constituency, the appropriate and material time to determine whether or not she was eligible to contest the elections was when the Electoral Commission opened nominations, and that has animated the consideration or influenced the consideration in this particular case of Judge Kweson's judgment.
Right. So the court's basis on that, and I'm just going through the consequential orders or the consequential directions, which says that they grant the reliefs of the plaintiff, and the first that upon a true and proper interpretation of 94(2)(a) of the 1992 Constitution of the Republic, the first defendant was not qualified at the time of filing his nomination forms between the 5th and the 9th of October 2020 to contest the 2020 parliamentary elections for the Asin North constituency as a member of parliament. You seem to contend that a lot of the reasoning of the court has been premised on that Zaneto ruling, for which we're seeing the trajectory of the court's reasoning in this light.
Yes. Even though there has been an attempt to rely on an Australian case, Gallagher, Gallagher's formulation of the law or of the Australian law appears to introduce as a first consideration whether a person can stand for an election, and in similar circumstances, because of the way the law in the Gallagher case has been framed, it captures even the eligibility to contest an election. But here it is a person qualified to be a member of parliament. Whether qualified to be a member of parliament starts from when the nomination opens or when nomination closes. But the court says, look, the timelines should start from when nomination opens. I don't agree, but that is a decision of the court.
And to which that the constitutionally mandated body, that's the Electoral Commission, saw it wise to approve and confirm of James Judge Kweson to go through all of the processes. You continue to make the argument that you do not agree.
Well, the court, you say, so the court adopted a strict interpretation of the provision in the law, Article 94(2)(a), and says that, well, you must not owe allegiance to any other country. And the Attorney General, there's a third defendant, supported that position by relying on the amendment to Article 8 of the Constitution, where it says that owing allegiance is being a citizen of another country, and that's imposed the dual citizenship. Now, the court is oblivious of the fact that the court has not taken into consideration that the Judge Kweson filed for a renunciation of his certificate. The renunciation of his citizenship or
Canadian citizenship,
allegiance, Canadian nationality in September 2019, or in 2019, and got the certificate in 2020 around November. Now, the court thinks that when elections were opened between the 5th of October and the 9th of October,
he had not received.
Should have received and presented as evidence his certificate of renunciation. Well, that's what the court thinks. The court says that approval of the application to renounce is evidenced by a certificate of renunciation issued by the Canadian minister responsible. And so, insofar as the Canadian minister did not issue that certificate, the Electoral Commission was wrong to have admitted as proof of renunciation the processes. Okay, that's the argument of the court.
Right.
That renunciation is complete and final upon the
receipt of a certificate.
Okay, and that insofar as that was not received, one could not have said that he had renounced his citizenship of Canada, at the time that he filed to contest the Asimov election.
Right. The court, even in the ruling, they seem to hold that argument. And if I could just read verbatim, it says that we hold that by the requirement of Article 8 as amended by Act 527 and Article 94(2)(a), any person who has obtained citizenship of another country other than Ghana and who files for nomination with the Electoral Commission to contest for election as a member of Parliament will not be qualified to contest for elections unless and until they show a record from the alternate state that they no longer hold the citizenship of that state as at the date of filing their nominations with the Electoral Commission. So based on this premise, the NDC, James Achikwesin, they've made the case that they will study this written judgment and then decide as to whether or not to appeal or seek a review, I beg your pardon, seek a review of the ruling of the justices of the Supreme Court.
Exactly.
Is it plausible, or does it make sense with a by-election in the offing that they kick in this mechanism for a review?
Well, when my attention was drawn to Section 20 of the Representation of People's Act, and the fact that it seems it is suggesting a different timeline for the assessment of the eligibility of a person to be a member of Parliament. And that is Section 20D or so, 1D or so of the Representation of People's Act. I thought that the court's attention was not drawn to it. But on reading the judgment, I have realized that the court's attention was drawn to it. But I have not finished reading the judgment. I have not seen how the court has treated at Section 20 of the Representation of People's Act. And it appears that the whole thing turns on that. Is there a rival interpretation contained in Section 20 of the Representation of People's Act? If there's a statute, if there's a representation an interpretation or a provision in the statute that appears to suggest that the timeline for assessing whether a person who owes dual allegiance is different from the timeline of a person who is not a registered voter in Article 94(1), then a strong case will be made on review, because judicial precedents do not override a statutory provision. So the statutory, put otherwise, statutory provisions have right of place, have prior, have the prior consideration, have consideration higher than the judicial precedent. And so, if the court did not treat that provision to the satisfaction of the Achikwesin and his counsel, then the case for judicial review might lie. But if it treated it well and concluded on it and pronounced on it, a review is not an appeal. So even if it got it wrong, you can't appeal against, because a review has very strict conditions, preconditions to fulfill before you can invoke the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court. And so we have to finish reading the judgment and to see how the court treated that. But on the whole, I can say that now, as reading the judgment, I follow the discussion of the law by His Lordship Justice Amegachi. I think there's heavy reliance on precedents, how the court has treated these matters, starting from Asari and Attorney General up to the Zenator cases, including Zakaria and Nimakan, the Wulense case. So that you see clearly a long list of cases that have been relied on as guiding the decision of the court.
Right then, Honorable, I appreciate that you could speak to us. We'll continue to skim through the document, and on the private side, we'll come for a lot more legal opinion as well on some of these matters.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's the Honorable Inusa Fusheni's former Member of Parliament for Tamale Central, and speaking to us, private legal practitioners were speaking to us on the reasoning of the Supreme Court. It's come out now in that May 17th ruling, which amongst many things saw the expunging of the name of James Chachi-Quayson from the records of Parliament. And you're listening to Hot Edition here on 3FM 92.7. We're streaming live on Facebook. Our handles 3FM 927 as well, amongst many other things on Twitter as well, same handles 3FM 927. And we'll be delving into other matters pretty shortly. And this is still Hot Edition here on 3FM 92.7. And we're going into our second big conversation for the day. We're bringing you details of it all throughout the day. Started from the morning in relation to the proposal by government to increase allocations per child under the school feeding program from the 97 pesos as recorded to 1 cedi 20 pesos. And the caterers, they had all throughout the morning been meeting, and they've arrived at a firm conclusion that they are rejecting the latest proposals by government to pay them 1 cedi 20 pesos as feeding grants. The Minister for Gender, Children and Social Protection, Zuwaira Lariba Abudu, on Sunday proposed a 23 pesos increase in the grant from the 97 pesos being paid the caterers currently. She also pledged government's commitment to paying outstanding claims by next week. Let's just take a quick step back and listen to exactly what the minister had to say at that news conference.
The cost per child per day has been proposed as 1 cedi 20 pesos, and we are still in talks with the Ministry of Finance to see how best, if it can be reviewed. Delay in payment is true. 30,860 something is huge. So when the document is very voluminous, you need to take time. And this people's money, you need to be very careful. I want to give the assurance here that next week, caterers' arrears will be paid.
That's the Minister for Gender, Children and Social Protection, Zuwaira Lariba Abudu. Well, the move is in response to the 6-week-old strike declared by the caterers in protest against the feeding grant, which they say is woefully inadequate. The caterers, they've also rejected the offer, insisting that government pays them nothing short of the 3 cedis 50 pesos they're demanding. They have, in addition, rejected calls for them to call off or boycott their strike. The caterers, they walked into our studios this afternoon, and Adizatu Amanwa Ankra is Public Relations Officer of the school feeding caterers.
For now, they are owing us 3 terms. Because we know it's pre-finance, we accept that. That is what the letter, our contract letter tells us, is pre-finance. We accept it. But at least 97 pesos, for God's sake, can you give your child 1 cedi to go and buy food? Even Agblica now is how much? Pure water, how much is it now? So we're expecting her to call us because we said we need 3 cedi 50 pesos.
Right.
Fine. If it's not going to be possible, that just call us so that we sit down and talk. We are all human beings. We understand. But all of a sudden, you just came and telling us the government have increased it. You have proposed 1 cedi 20 pesos. Whereby you are not supplying us anything. We buy everything that we use to cook for the children. We bought it for with our money. We buy it on credit basis. So if you went for loan and your money keep long without paying, before you be paid, the interest of the loan may let you hold the people. Because maybe instead of you to the money to spend at 3 months with you, the money will spend more than 3 months with you. So the interest will grow up. So at least just call us. You don't know your worker. You came in as a leader and you don't know your workers. So how can you do this job?
She says that by next week, all the 3 terms arrears owed you would be paid. Is this
Hallelujah.
Is this something that you're confident
Hallelujah.
in receiving?
We have been hearing this more than 3 months now. You will be paid next week. Even our caterers are calling us very soon. That's the name. That's our nicknames, very soon. Because we always tell the members that very soon we will be paid. Very soon we will be paid. And that is what is going on now. We have heard these things since last 3 months. We have been told that we are going to be paid.
Being told that you'll be paid,
and up till now we haven't been paid. So what gives us assurance that what she was telling us now is true?
Is that one of the reasons why you're refusing to call off the strike? You want the money to hit your accounts before you call off the strike?
Yes, and even the 1 cedi 20 pesos. We are not going to take 1 cedi 20 pesos unless maybe she can come out and explain it further for us. The reason why we should take 1 cedi 20 pesos. If you give child banku, banku is how much per ball? And banku with okra stew or banku with fish and pepper. At times banku with groundnut soup. So 1 cedi 20 pesos, jollof rice, or 1 cedi 20 pesos, omotu at times. So please, we are all human beings.
So that's the public relations officer of the School Feeding Caterers Association, Adizatu Amanua Ankra, speaking to me earlier in the day. Well, following that outright rejection of the proposals from government and also the promise to have the arrears paid them by next week, the minister invited the caterers to a meeting. My colleague Grace Hamwajiman is there for us with a lot more as to exactly what's happening at that meeting. Grace, what can you report from the gender ministry? Does it look like there's an agreement going forward?
Yes, Mawuena, we've been here. If my time, we've been here in the last an hour or more, and we know that the minister is currently meeting leadership of the caterers, who number, I could count around more than 10 of them. We've just been called in. The meeting has been going on, so we've just been called in to come and listen to the outcome of that meeting. So I'm walking in even as I'm speaking to you, but yet to get to hear what they are saying. But the looks on the faces of these caterers are one that can tell that probably there's been some form of agreement which is likely to be in their favor.
Grace, we just leave it here and come back to you if you get a lot more details for us. That's my colleague Grace Asariajiman there, walking into what looks like a news conference that should start any moment from now from the gender ministry, seeking to provide some details as to the meeting with the caterers over the last 1 hour plus since she has been there, and we're hoping that in the course of the bulletin we can get the details and give it to you here first here on Hot Edition. But we're not just leaving this subject just quite yet, because the Africa Education Watch, they've done some work in relation to the school feeding program and what they believe is an appropriate allocation per child that should stay for going forward in terms of if you want to see a hot, nutritious meal, as has been the case by the minority, whom we'll hear from pretty shortly as well. Kofi Asare is the executive director of the Africa Education Watch, and they, in the past, had called for around 300% increase in the 97 pesos which was being received by the caterers. Working the telephone lines, Kofi Asare is the executive director of the Africa Education Watch, who join us on the telephone lines. I mentioned that we'll hear from the minority pretty shortly. Dr. Clement Park is the deputy ranking on the Education Committee of Parliament. He's also a Busa South Member of Parliament. He's been reacting to the 97 peso, the 1 cedi 20 peso increase, I should say, or the proposal rather, by the gender minister, and says that it is nothing short of a slap on the face.
How much is the cost of an egg? I expect these women to buy fuels, whether charcoal or wood or LPG gas, and they are supposed to procure water. They are supposed to at least get 1 or 2 persons to assist them, and they are supposed to procure soap to clean dishes. In this system, you cannot tell me that the amount that is being proposed is even sufficient to feed a pet cat, let alone to feed our wards. Now remember, the school feeding program is supposed to provide a hot, nutritious meal. The IMF has made us aware that in spite of the fact that we are gone for a bailout, provision has been made to protect pro-poor policies.
Dr. Clement Park is a deputy ranking on the Education Committee of Parliament. Spoke to us a lot earlier in reaction to the increase by some 23 pesos. I mentioned that Kofi Asare is the executive director of the Africa Education Watch. He's joined us on the telephone line for quick reaction. So it's been described largely by the minority as a slap on the face. I know that you have done some work in relation to this and have made proposals in the past as to what would be an acceptable allocation per child. How did you receive the news of 1 cedi 20 pesos, a 23 pesos increase to the existing allocation per child?
Yeah, good evening to a cherished audience. I think to begin with, government proposal to pay 1 cedi 20 pesos it's informed by nothing. It's informed by nothing, it's a non-starter because it is informed by nothing. Now, one key thing that should inform the pricing of food being served in our schools is food price inflation. Okay. Now, between 2018, when the school feeding fees was fixed at 1 cedi, 7.97 pesos, and today, food price inflation over the period is almost 100%. Even year on year, just between 2022 and 2023, is 50%. Just year on year. So it is based on nothing. The government is proposing a 20% increment. It is based on nothing. Now, the second reason why it is based on nothing is that under the free senior high school program, government provides one hot meal for day students at large. The same hot meal we provide for at lunch for basic school students. Now, guess what? Government spends 3 cedis on each meal at that level. So why is government spending 1 cedi 20 pesos? Because the same caterers will buy from the same market to feed the same students. They are all Ghanaians. What makes even the matter worse is that the caterers in senior high schools will actually be procuring to feed a larger student population. Averagely, there are 3,000 students in an average senior high school. Compare it to a basic school, averaging 500, some less. And so economy of scale is enjoyed by the senior high schools, the procurement processes of the senior high schools, and you have a much, smaller number. So there is it is based on nothing. The government is proposing the 1.2. The reality is that if you look at the budget by the Minister of Finance presented to Parliament, the school feeding budget was actually increased by only 10%. And again, I'm telling you that it's because it is based on nothing. Government's own budget for 2023 only has an increment of 10% for the school feeding program, from 880 to about 960 million. So how do you justify a 10% increment in the school feeding budget and a 20% proposal by government? It means that it is based on nothing.
Right.
I think it's about time we have a conversation, about how important the Ghana school feeding program is, and the fact that it is not possible to pay a different price for the same land in senior high schools from that of the basic schools. The caterers are demanding at least 3 cedis. I think that 3 cedis is the minimum that can provide a hot meal a day, because even for the 3 cedis being spent in senior high schools are complaining that the amount is inadequate in view of the food price situation. So the minimum that they need is something consistent with what is happening in the senior high school.
Right.
And exactly that is what they are demanding. The government must meet them instead of playing sweet dragon, as if there is no money. There is money.
Right.
There is money.
This, you believe, feeds into the continuous narrative of basic education being marginalized at the expense of free SHS?
Of course. It's not a priority compared to senior high schools. It has always been so. Other than that, why should we be discussing this? We are talking about the same food for the same people. They are in Ghana, they are Ghanaians, and even one enjoying economy of scale, and they are getting much more per unit cost than the one that is enjoying a smaller market, this economy of scale. I mean, come on. It is there. So it is not a priority. It is not a priority. But we should change the narrative, you understand, to change the narrative and let funds for school feeding be distributed equitably. I understand that the Ghana School Feeding Program is under the Ministry of Gender, which makes it a social protection intervention, and that the Food Scenario School Program is under the Ministry of Education. I understand. But let's be frank with ourselves. We are deploying resources to feed Ghanaian children, whether it's on the Ministry of Gender or Ministry of Education. The price of the food must be consistent with each other, because we can't compromise on the quality of food served to students in basic schools just because that program is under a different ministry. No, it doesn't make them less Ghanaian and less citizens. So government must come clear on this and ensure that at least 3 cities are provided for school feeding cases. Other than that, we will not be having, we'll just be going round. We will not be sustaining the program. And not to know the issues that the World Bank has raised. Yes, other partners are interested in supporting the program. Others are supporting. But if government will demonstrate ownership, by disbursing funds, by ensuring that the politicized nature of the project, is actually made history, by ensuring that quality assurance systems are instituted, proper governance mechanisms are instituted and all that, and paying realistic fee for the food prepared. If government does not pursue those reforms and we continue doing it as before, we might end up having some of the donors withdraw their support. And so it's important for government to come again on this proposal and then meet the school feeding program at the same cost as the meeting feeding school.
Right, then.
And the earlier the better, because they are on strike. So the earlier the better.
Well,
we are in 2 weeks' time, and we know the implication their strike is having on enrollment and on retention. We want this issue resolved before school reopens in about a month's time.
Right. So it looks like there's some headway being made, because just before we connected with you on the telephone lines, my colleague Grace Hamo-Ajiman, she's currently at the Gender Ministry, where the minister is meeting these caterers, and just on our platform, we're getting the sense that the school feeding president has expressed satisfaction with the meeting, and that the government is now providing assurance that the monies hits the accounts tomorrow, because they are owed some arrears as well. But there's not been any word yet on the allocation per child, but it may look like
the discussion at the ministry has to do with the period of arrears. It has nothing to do with they accepting the new 1 to 20 pesos. The 1 to 20 pesos can only buy an egg. It can't do anything more. Do you understand? So the discussion they are having, or the applications they are having, is more about the payment of the arrears, which has nothing to do with the proper pricing of the policy for social return to school. Because even if they pay the arrears, the only basis for them returning to work and cooking should be that the government has determined a realistic price, for the food. Yes. So if you pay the arrears to them and you still want them to cook for 1 to 20%, and they say they can't cook, nothing will happen. So it's important for the 2 issues to be addressed. Payment of arrears, one, yes, but most importantly, moving forward, for them to start cooking, there must be a realistic fee or cost for cooking. And so the 2 issues go in hand and must be addressed to ensure that the program is working.
Right then, Mr. Asare, I appreciate that you could speak to us.
You're welcome.
That's Kofi Asare. He's the Executive Director of Education think tank, the Africa Education Watch, speaking to us this evening here on Hot Edition. And I mentioned that my colleague Grace Hamo-Ajiman, she's at that news conference for us. Let's just touch base quickly. Grace, it appears there's some resolution from that meeting. Talk to us briefly.
Yes, Mana. So the update is that the Gender Minister has updated us that the arrears owed these caterers should start hitting the account from tomorrow, Tuesday, and latest by Wednesday. Every one of them should receive the amount. We know that these caterers have also been asking for some increment when she said that they are looking at 1 to 20 pesos. That one is also pending approval from the Finance Ministry and the Presidency. As soon as that approval is also granted, then they will start paying the 1 to 20 pesos. So that's the latest from that long meeting.
Is it the case that the traders have agreed to receive 1 to 20 pesos as allocation for a child going forward?
Yes. The president spoke with us and she said, well, they know that times are hard and the government is doing all it can. So they are in for the 120. They see it as at one step at a time. They know there will come at a point where government can pay more than the 120. So it looks like they've accepted the 120.
Right then, Grace Ajiman speaking to us there with a lot more details. 15 minutes to the top of the hour. Let's do business now. Nanakia Mensah Brampas joined us in the studio with some more details from the world of business. Hello, Kia.
You're looking dapper this evening.
Let's get into business, Kia.
Thank you for joining us on the business segment here on Hot Edition. Mawuena, this week the 3 Business team is going heavy on the banking sector issues arising, talking about the domestic debt exchange program as well as the bank's recapitalization, and key or major has to do with the calls for reversing of the licenses of banks that were unjustly revoked during the banking sector cleanup and the assurances that followed by the president. So let's go straight into business. And banking consultant Dr. Kojo Abuaji-Deborah is urging the Bank of Ghana to exempt local banks from its recapitalization plans for the sector in September this year. Speaking to the team, he is further proposing the establishment of an equity fund to help sustain the banks from the negative impact of the domestic debt exchange program.
It should not be assumed that everybody, yes, it is good that everybody should be well capitalized. Consideration should also be given to the local banks. While we are doing this, I would advise that some equity fund should be set up to bail out, as was done in some countries or jurisdictions. Typically, it's Greece, where once it's a national disaster, the government should step in and take some recognition to this, and therefore bail out the local banks. Because if you don't do that, it will get to a point the whole industry will be taken by the foreign banks. And is that what we are looking for? I don't think shaping and strengthening the whole entire financial sector should not be given to the foreign banks. And therefore, my advice is let us try to separate the strength of each of these institutions in the industry. We should not be assumed that they all have the same, because the shareholders may not have the same strength. And therefore, my advice are 2 things. And I'm recommending that 1, exemptions should be given to the local banks. 2, an equity fund should be set up.
And that was banking consultant Dr. Kojo Abuaji-Deborah. Still on the banking sector, respected economist Kwame Pianim has called for the restoration of banks whose licenses may have been revoked for political reasons. This follows assurances by President Mahama to reverse the licenses of banks that were unjustly revoked during the banking sector cleanup. Speaking in an exclusive interview with 3 Business, the renowned economist said it is important to have local successful entrepreneurs playing a role in the banking sector.
A few people got into banking who should not have gotten into banking. They were not fit and proper individuals to go into banking, and they should not have been allowed, because they are no different from armed robbers who come with a mask to rob a bank. What they want is just get a banking license and take deposits from you and from me, and then use the deposits to build real estate for themselves and to finance their companies. Those type of people have to be weeded out. Those who were running serious businesses and thought politically their businesses were run for political reasons, I don't support that. If we can find that out, we should reverse it. Because look, it's good for Ghana that we have successful private entrepreneurs. The more entrepreneurs we have, the more millionaires we have, the better for this economy. And I think that all political parties should endorse and support the growth.
And that was respected economist Kwame Pianim there. For the first time in 4 weeks, government's treasury bills were oversubscribed. The government in last week's auction targeted to raise some 2.8 billion cedis from the 91 and 182 treasury day bills, but was able to raise 324.01 million cedis from that targeted amount. And market watchers attribute the oversubscription to a glut of money in the market and predict a continuous oversubscription while interest rates remain high. And just before we go on the foreign scenes, all eyes are on Apple as it is expected to launch a mixed reality headset at its annual Worldwide Developers Conference in California. It will be the technology's Giant's most significant product since it unveiled the Apple Watch in 2015. Boss Tim Cook is expected to use his keynote speech to say this new product in the future, but its expected price tag of about $3,000 might make that a tough sell for consumers like Kelvin, who's ready. Yeah,
when you said Tim Cook, all I said was he should cook. he should cook for us.
So that's it for business.
Many
on
thanks.
Hot Edition.
That's Nanekia Mensa Brampa. Kelvin, who sponsor like you heard him laugh, is here with the very latest in the world of sports. Kelvin, what's happening?
Well, looking dapper, Mawuena.
Get into sports.
Well, let's begin from the senior national team, where Ghana forward Iñaki Williams has pulled out of the Black Stars squad to face Madagascar in the 2023 Africa Cup of Nations qualifier due to injury. Iñaki was enlisted in Chris Hutton's 24-man squad for the penultimate game against Madagascar in Antananarivo on the 18th of June. Has decided to pull out. Since a few weeks, I've been playing with pain in my right knee. I decided to play until the end of the season, but after having spoken to the medical services, we've decided to stop and solve the problem to be 100% fit for the preseason, he wrote in a post on Twitter, which means Chris Hutton may probably replace him or go with 23 men. Now to the Black Princesses of Ghana, and head coach Yusuf Basigi, after winning the inaugural WAFU Under 20 Girls Championship, has made an appeal that despite the promising talent displayed by the girls, he doesn't want them to be rushed into the Black Queens.
However, with this team, I will not hesitate to recommend any of them to the Queens, because Queens, they have a lot of good players there, and these players need to mature. They have to pass through the mill so that by the time they get to the Queens, they are good to go. Otherwise, they should not be rushed into the Black Queens.
So that is from Yusuf Basigi. Now moving on, Real Madrid will be in the market for a new number 9 this summer, with Karim Benzema announcing his departure from the club. John Hernandez, who is a journalist and writes for ESPN in Spain, believes that Tottenham Hotspur's Harry Kane is the best fit as replacement.
So I think it's good for Benzema. It's good for Real Madrid as well, because they need to rebuild the team. It's a good time. It's a proper time to do change now. We will see which is the next number 9 at Real Madrid. But obviously, Real Madrid has been very successful the last 3-4 seasons, and now needs a new kind of players, a new start. They are speaking on Harry Kane, but whether Harry Kane is, or maybe in the future Mbappe or Haaland, whoever is coming to Real, is going to be a new fresh start. And obviously, Benzema is going to be always forever a big legend at Real Madrid. But I believe that the time is proper, and his time at Real Madrid was done.
Well, there are still options for Real Madrid. There is Kai Havertz, Victor Osimhen, Kylian Mbappe, and Lautaro Martinez. Now moving on, Celtic boss Ange Postecoglou has agreed to become Tottenham's new manager on a 2-year contract. The Australian 57 has just finished his second season at Celtic, leading them to the Scottish title both years and the domestic treble this term. Spurs have been looking for a new manager since Antonio Conte's exit in March, with Christian Stellini and then Ryan Mason taking interim charge. The final element of the deal are being finalized before an announcement is made. Now finishing up with some news from the French Open, and Holger Rune just closed out a 5-set thriller against Francisco Cerundolo from Argentina for a spot in the quarters. He won 7-6, 3-6, 6-4, 1-6, and 7-6, and he did that in 3 hours 59 minutes, as well as Casper Ruud roaring back into the Roland Garros last 8 with a resolute 7-6, 7-5, 7-5 triumph over informed Nicolas Jarry on the court Philippe Chatrier. There is more coming up. Iga Swiatek and the rest having their games coming up. So we'll be giving updates on 3news.com as well.
You really need to be fit to play tennis, eh?
Yeah,
3+ hours.
Yeah.
That's more than football.
I think we've gone the mile for about 5 hours 20 minutes. That was last week. Yeah.
Wow.
So we should expect more.
It's crazy. Many thanks, Kelvin. It's brought us the very latest in the Real Madrid should come for Kai Havertz, by the way. That's my only wish this transfer window, as and when we get into it. Akofa is here, bringing us the very latest from the world of entertainment.
Mawuena, I have so many things to say, but I think I'll say it after I'm
you're
done.
Not going to follow the tangent.
I am going to say it after I am done. But you're looking really good. What's happening? What's happening?
Get into entertainment.
Well, coming up on entertainment tonight, winner of Talented Kids Season 14, Abigail Ejiri, received a rapturous welcome when she arrived in Pram Pram in the Greater Accra region. Abigail came tops at the grand finale on April 16 at the conference center.
From the shores of Nego Pram Pram in the Greater Accra region, 7-year-old versatile dancer Abigail rose above competition to win Talented Kids Season 14. Just like her other competitors, she set out with the intention of not only exhibiting her talent, but also making her indigents proud. Residents of Pram Pram and its environs came out in their numbers to welcome Abigail and celebrate the success of the Class 5 people of Veterinary Academy.
Also being the winner of TV3 Talented Kids is the 14. We are here to award their 1-year scholarship, which includes textbooks, exercise books, notebooks, all the uniform of the school.
At a special gathering to welcome Abigail Ejiri, Rep. for the Member of Parliament for Ningo Pram Pram, Sam George, lauded Abigail, describing her as a fine example for others to emulate.
Abigail's victory is a victory for the good people of Ningo Pram Pram. She is somebody who is so dear to the people of Ningo Pram Pram. In fact, Abigail went into the competition as Abigail, but she came out as Ningo Pram Pram. And we are so much grateful to God Almighty for such a wonderful victory. Abigail is a special child. It is our hope that the young ones who are upcoming will learn from Abigail.
Father of the versatile dancer was thankful to the good people for their unwavering support to Abigail.
The support has been massive. God has done it. We didn't know things would turn out like this, but we are grateful to God. We are grateful to all the fans. We are grateful to everybody, each and everyone who has been part of this success. And I want to say to parents who have kids with disability that it's never inability. Every child that we have is a gift from God. No matter the circumstance, there is something special in that child.
And before I go, Nigerian Afrobeat singer Burna Boy has set a new milestone as he becomes the first African artist to sell out London Stadium when, with his Love Damini tour, made a stop in the UK in June. The highly anticipated 3-hour non-stop concert drew an incredible crowd of 80,000 fans, completely selling out the stadium and truly cementing his historic moment in Burna Boy's career. Now, Burna Boy treated fans to a set list that included as many as 49 songs from his impressive catalogue of hits. Now, the concert also had guest performances from UK's top artists like Popcorn, Stormzy, Dave, and J Hus. And that will be all the entertainment news here on Hot Edition, powered by 3 Entertainment. My name is Akofa, and Mawuena, who's looking very, very dapper today, is taking over.
Right then, Akofa, many thanks for bringing us. I love Burna Boy, by the way, and a lot of the artists, Popcorn to be specific, vibe to his music a lot. But let's end with some energy related matters, because the former Power Minister Dr. Kwabena Donkor, he's criticized the World Bank country director to Ghana for his comments that the former President Mahama's administration signed the most expensive power agreement in the energy sector. He insists the country director should have focused on the deteriorating exchange rates which has affected power purchase agreements.
The World Bank country director Pierre-Frank Laporte is reported to have said that the Mahama administration signed the most expensive agreements in the energy sector. According to him, Ghana is paying more for power than it should be, even for electricity not used, due to the terms of the power purchase agreements. But former power minister under the Eswell Mahama administration, Dr. Kwabena Donkor, says the country's director's comments are inaccurate and partisan.
He claimed we'd signed the most expensive PPAs. We'd also signed take-or-pay agreements, and we signed PPAs that we couldn't recover the price. Ameri is the cheapest thermal plant agreement signed in the country. The Jacobson power purchase agreement is cheaper than some of the existing power purchase agreements.
That's former Prime Minister Dr. Kwabena Donkor ending this evening's edition of Hot Edition here on 3FM 92.7. As always, a lot more news on 3news.com. Our top stories this evening has situated largely on the judgment, the written judgment by the Supreme Court. We've been seeking to get a bit more understanding as to what the justices of the Apex Court laid their argument on in arriving at the decision. We spoke to Inusa Fusheni, who believes that, well, judgment is quite fresh and we're all studying it, and that there'll be a lot more for you if you stay with us here on 3FM 92.7 as well as on 3news.com. I am Eric Mawuena Egbeta. Pleasure that you could be a part of this evening's bulletin. Have a good evening.